Good afternoon, team. Good afternoon, LinkedIn. Today we're doing a Beyond Soft OppCast on red teaming. This is the first of a couple different opportunity casts with regards to different subjects and topics that are relevant and recent to the current contractor environment. And today I want to introduce some subject matter experts on the red teaming side, and we will kick off for about 15 minutes and talk about red teaming, the do's and don'ts, the sustains, the improves, and some different vignettes. So Rob, I'll open it up to you. Welcome.
Okay, thanks, Stephen and gangs. This is Rob Dubois. I'm a retired Navy SEAL and intelligence officer operator for NSA. So the reason I flowed into red teaming as a result of my work was that I started 10 years with NSA as a counter-Soviet Russian guy and moved into the SEAL teams to be a special reconnaissance operator and eventually counterterrorism and red teaming. So red teaming we'll talk about during this cast was a combination of my intelligence and operational background that led to me being able to flow into DTRA initially as a red team practitioner, traveling the world, finding vulnerability at U.S. bases, went on to direct the DoD's red team for operations at the highest level, and finally went into private practice consulting as a red teamer. So I've been doing it for about 20 years.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for joining. Brad, you're up.
Hi, Brad Hudson here. Retired in December of 2021 from the Army after 27 years. Just to give you a couple of highlights in my career, I was a security fellow for Indo-PACOM at the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies in Hawaii. That's where I kind of got started at red teaming. Left there, went to USERPAC, was the red team operations there for that command. Transitioned from strategic logistics to functional area 52, which is nuclear and counter weapons of mass destruction, and subsequently was assigned to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, where I worked as a program manager doing artificial intelligence and machine learning for our tier 1 clients. Did that till I retired, and then I became a federal contractor for DHS, Department of Homeland Security, where I did counter weapons of mass destruction planning, and red teaming was very much becoming a common theme at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency and DHS. They were wanting to develop red teaming a lot at that time.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Brian, great to have you. How are you?
Oh, thanks. I'm doing fine, Steve. Thanks for the invitation. Yeah, I'm Brian McDermott. I'm a retired Marine after 20 years. Most of my career, I was a CH-53 Echo helicopter pilot. And then the last few years, I taught at Marine Corps University in Quantico, Virginia. I actually got into red teaming in the Marine Corps in 2013 when I was one of the plank owners for Marine Corps University Red Team, where I went to the U.S. Army Red Team School. After I retired from the Marines, I was a contractor supporting various agencies and critical thinking, structure-related techniques. I was a tactical and a strategic red team analyst at the Joint Improvised Threat Defeat Organization, JIDO, as well as Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DTRA. And also did a senior facilitator gig with OD&I. Currently, I am a solutions architect for a company, and also with red teaming after the Marines. I've also had my own LLC where I've done red team education and facilitation for Meta Global Security Red Team and Platform Aerospace, and also I've designed and teach an asynchronous online course for Marine Corps University for those learners that want to get red team education and understand the red team methodologies.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks much on that. And I'm going to stick with you, Brian. I'm going to just kind of go into Lombardi style, go into the basics here, since you're on pretty good on the education side as it relates to CV there. So, and then guys, jump in on this after Brian kicks off. Can you describe to the audience what is a red team? Just, kind of the basics.
No, thanks, Steve. So basically red teaming, it actually kind of depends on who you talk to. And what I mean by that is if you talk to a if you talk to somebody who's got cyber experience, I mean, red team, that's like penetration of networks
Right.
On the offensive side. If you talk to someone who's more familiar with the physical penetration, probably something Rob has experience in, I'll leave that to him. But I know that part's out there. The one that I'm most familiar with, it actually started with the Army and it's been infused in the Marine Corps and DoD writ large in Joint Pubs 5-Tag-0, Joint Pub 2-Tag-0, the Red Team Handbook version 9, and Joint Doctrine Note 1-Tag-16. And basically, it is in that essence, it's using alternative analysis to enhance the commander to make a better decision, as well as the staff to help out make that holistic approach to operations plans and things like that. And the other part of red teaming that I did when I was with Jido and Ditra, it's going to get more into understanding the mindset of the adversary, understanding their motivations and how they think, and designing emulations to help say the blue force or the friendly forces understand what could happen, whether it is the most, I'll call most likely or most dangerous, even if it's like a black swan type event type of thing. But basically get the commanders and the decision makers all the information they need to make the best informed decision that they can make and mitigate the risk if they have to accept it.
That's awesome. Thanks much.
Steve, I'll jump in real quick. I just want to add to what Brian just said. One of the things that I saw when I was the ops officer was the command wants to use you as a red cell, like during a tabletop exercise, like a force on force. Mm-hmm. And that is not really traditionally the way a red team was supposed to be employed. Just like Brian said, we have, the intimate knowledge of what the command's plans, its vulnerabilities are, and a working knowledge of the enemy's capabilities. And we're supposed to combine those two to pick apart our strategies, plans, and operations.
Right.
Whereas a red cell would be operating completely as an enemy's, what an enemy would do. So in other words, blue force, you do one thing, red cell does this, and so forth and so on.
That's a great differentiation right there, because lots of times there is a little collusion between the two,
right.
Which is fine occasionally when that's planned for, but that's good that you brought up the difference between the two. Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd like to stack on it too, Steve.
Go ahead.
Real quick. As both Brian and Brad have said, it does depend on who you ask. And red teaming, I like to look at it more universally, to include the physical pen testing, to include, as Brad described, the red cell that moves independently, to include the penetration testing of the cyber world. Because as Brian said, if you ask a cyber, like my son, who's a cyber security guy, what red teaming is, I'll say, oh, it's finding the vulnerabilities, the 0-day gaps, and so forth. So red teaming writ large is alternative perspectives, especially the adversary's capabilities, as Brad said, and mindset, using those, whatever the purposes. I've been a mafia guy, I've been a cyber hacker, I've been a financial con artist, I've been ISIS, I've been Al-Qaeda. And those they do cross over, of course. There are private practitioners who do red teaming, and they will do, lock picking and so forth. So what I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that it can be any of the above, depending on what your listener needs to understand, whatever that person is thinking about. Hey, what's the utility here? How do I use it? We joke around in the SEAL teams about how anything's a hammer for a SEAL, right? It's frog hammer. A screwdriver is a frog hammer. Pliers are a frog hammer. So it's about taking the tools, opening aperture, and saying, what can I do with this?
No, I love it. And, with that, I'm going to segue right into one of the other questions we have, which is, what makes a good red team support contractor? And of course, what you just stated is literally knowing the differentiation between what the customer and or the client is asking, and executing your trade and your craft within those left and right limits. So I'll kick that over to Brad. What do you think? What makes a good red team support contractor?
So, well, I think there's a lot of similarities between what makes a good red team for the DoD and uniform. Is you got to have that autonomy to be able to speak those truths. When that plan that's presented is, sometimes, it's pretty solid. And then in other times we might tear it up, and you got to have that autonomy to be able to tell them, hey boss, there's a lot missing here, but here's how we can make it better. And that's kind of the way you have to frame it. And, just having a boss that's able to take that lump under the guise that, hey, we're going to be that much stronger at the end because you've identified these shortfalls.
Brian, how have you seen that done successfully?
Yeah, so I've seen so with a support contractor, if they're intellectually curious and if they have an open mind and be intellectually humble, which is tough to do, especially if you're talking with people who have military or law enforcement experience in various aspects, in order to as Brad said, the big thing is also leadership buy-in. So how do you get leadership buy-in? You have to demonstrate the capabilities on what can be done. And there's various methodologies that Red Teamer can use when in trying to mitigate, I'll say, groupthink, which is one of the principles of the Army Red Team schools, groupthink mitigation. There's certain tools, cognitive tools, facilitation tools for that, but also applying critical. Everyone talks about critical thinking. Well, actually, you can be taught on how to apply critical thinking, and there's some cognitive tools that can help you do that. And as what Brad and also I think Rob said, that alternative perspective. Take what everyone's talking about, and then using that same information and showing the plausibility that something else could happen. Or if you're looking at a plan, as Brad was talking about, picking apart those vulnerabilities in the plans and take the perspective of this is where the vulnerability is from this perspective, or not even just an adversary. It could also be your ally perspective. For example, in the Middle East, everyone's got their own interests at heart. So, in the example I'll say with the Saudis in the U.S. or the Iraqis in the U.S., but are also going to take their own considerations. And maybe that's where a Red Teamer can help, I'll say, the American commander or a joint coalition Western-minded commander to take those into consideration. I've seen that done for vulnerabilities in my identifying vulnerabilities and what could happen for certain events. I'll say in Iraq a few years ago when I was a Red Team analyst, but also looking at internally. I know with DITRA, I was asked to, with the team I had at that time, where I did some education on facilitation techniques, they actually wanted us to look inside to the organization, identify the strengths and weaknesses of the organization as they're trying to transition to a new vision statement, new mission statement, and all those kind of things on what kind of problem sets they had to do in the future. So that's where a different, talk about the adversary mindset, but red teaming methodology could also be used internally to better enhance the organization to do whatever they're going to be asked to do and stuff like that. So I've seen it on both sides of the fence.
Perfect. Rob, same do's and don'ts, what you've seen?
Oh, I want to absolutely echo what Brad and Brian have spoken about. Specifically, when I do my kind, I'm not sure if Brian mentioned this, but he and I have worked together, and it's been a real blessing for me professionally because I'm able to watch him unpack, as he talked about, the mitigating analysis, structured mitigation, and so forth. The academics of red teaming are. At one point, I briefed a couple of colonels, the brigade and the command red team colonels in Baghdad, and after I did my what I, as Brian seen my talk called "Better Red Than Dead," which is a play on words from those of us who are old enough to remember the Soviets and the better dead than red. So better red than dead, they said, after an hour, they said, that was great. When did you go to the red team course at Leavenworth for 9 weeks or whatever? I said, I've never been there. I've just been doing this for decades. And it turned out that the fundamentals are there. The fundamentals are all there. Right. And that's why we had this overlap. It was matching. So what I have learned the long way around do is bring humility. And as Brian said, open-mindedness, intellectual humility. I'm not there for black guys. Anybody who wants to go into red teaming to be a cool guy and say, I gotcha, is doing it for the wrong reasons. I'm doing it because I've talked to boys whose commanders were lying there half severed from an IED, and I want to prevent that in the future. And that boy that I interviewed talked about that doesn't want that to happen like you saw happening the night before. I don't want anybody ripped apart. I don't want my adversary to win, whether it's a financial win or whatever the goal is. Even as Brian said, internally, we want to focus on the enemies, if you will. Red teaming is all about enemies because it's the red perspective, as in Blue Force, Red Force. but we want to prevent the harm that will come from this unseen threat. So we become the threat. We become the wolf. I call us to counter to complement Dave Gross's the sheepdog analogy. I call red teamers, some of us at least, reformed wolves. We're not out there trying to be the sheepdog and protect the flock. We're out there thinking like the thief. Right. It takes a thief to catch a thief.
No, that's great. We've got about 5 minutes left. I wanted to kind of get your ideas on it's kind of a two-part piece. One, what is the primary differences that you see now, post 9/11, post pandemic in red teaming that are different today than it was pre events? And then also any differentiators that you would describe that are different in SOF, special operations, and the intel community as it relates to those. So I'll kick that off with Brian.
Yeah, so I think the difference that I've seen, and Rob can talk about the SEALs. I can talk a little bit about the Army Special Forces because I've seen their training. I've taught some special forces in my time as a contractor supporting an intelligence community agency. And what I like and what happened with SOF, and the Marines do this also with various exercises, is one of the principles is fostering cultural empathy. And fostering cultural empathy, I know SOF teams have specialty areas where they really learn about the language, the culture of the specific area that they're going to be going in and or be primarily responsible for. If they have to be a quick reaction force, kind of like the 82nd Airborne when the Red Star cluster goes off and POTUS says, go do this. Marines kind of do this with many different exercises with different militaries, whether it's Western or non-Western. If you think Bala-Katan, out in the Philippines or something, or what they do with the ROC Marines in South Korea. So that fostering cultural empathy, truly being thinking from that other person's perspective, I see the SOF being a differentiator, and some of the other, and some people can do it very well, some people can't. And that's where it just takes a lot of discipline in order to better employ that cultural empathy, maybe tied it in with self-reflection and awareness. That's another principle of Army red teaming. And how the best practices I can be, red teaming is not intelligence analysis. It's not. Red teaming, intelligence analysis is set forth by a bunch of intelligence community directives. Red teaming is more of understanding the capabilities and intent and being able to show what is possible, not just mitigate that black swine, but mitigate that gray rhino, that high impact, high probability event that people don't want to deal with. It costs too much money to deal with. You've got to change your infrastructure. Well, these are things that we know that are coming, and red team can help bring that in a different perspective to maybe cause some action to be taken before that black swan or that gray rhino event were to happen.
Awesome. Brad, what do you think about that? And kind of stepping into what, just caveat off what Brian said, being ego agnostic, if you will.
Yeah. So first of all, your first part of the question, the major part, the difference that I see from the time that I spent was we were focused on a lot of what Rob talked about, the physical aspect of it, and then a lot of what Brian said and the picking apart the strategy. But what I've seen is I've actually talked to more contract in the contractor space about it's all cyber. Like no one is interested in the physical piece, and what are very not very interested, and literally no one has even heard of it being applied to strategy other than people that have gone to the Army red teaming school. I mean, so I tried to introduce it to the command, and they like give me lip service and then tell me to go away. So they've been briefed on it, but they're not really interested in really utilizing it for that purpose. The point that I wanted to kind of like to tack on was, I think it's very easy to convince a command of red teaming effectiveness and its ability to make a difference when it comes to application against a physical threat or physical facilities. And so, in that regard, Rob, I think you've done a great job selling the wares, and because it's something they can observe right away. Oh, this group of terrorists at the North Gate, we can stop them from penetrating the perimeter, we've succeeded. So that's something that everybody understands. But when it comes to applying the same kind of thinking and like Brian was saying, the analytic techniques to a strategy, I don't really think it's not that much harder. It just requires a different type of thinking. And I think by the time our leaders get to that point, their ability for that mental flexibility has diminished. So let's just say. And I think if you get the right leadership, if they've been brought up the right way, some of them bend to that direction, it's easier for them. They can understand if you address the strategy, there's less threat on the physical side because you've addressed those things in the strategy. Does that make sense?
It does. Rob, we've got about a minute left, so I'll leave it to you before closing.
Okay, great. I'll wrap this up real fast. So I definitely want to stack on what the two gentlemen have said. Brad and Brian are right about, in my opinion, right about the idea that leadership is a huge part of this. Having the investment from on high is critical. It is easy to say, "Hey, you're gonna lose Marines at this outpost." Oh, okay, let's put money against it. But that's the great lack, the great starvation in America is vision, long-term vision. We have, I heard at a conference recently, we're 1 year into our 1 year plan, every goddamn year.
Yeah.
We need to be looking ahead for the long view. What is really going to happen? How do we really want to prevail 50 years from now? And it works on strategy, as these guys are talking about. The issue is, as Mattis said one time to Congress, if you don't fully fund State Department, I'm going to have to buy more bullets, because we do have a 10-to-1 ratio on expenses from DOD to that. So basically it goes back to vision, and Congress won't fund things that don't get them elected. It has to be big, it has to be bright, it has to sparkle. And so we can't have leadership, including DOD or corporate, that it takes vision and humility, sorry, open-mindedness and humility on those leaders' parts as well, and it is lacking badly.
Awesome. Great points, guys. Thanks a lot. This will probably be the first of maybe some additional speakers. And I really appreciate you guys coming on today, talk about Red Team, what it is, what it isn't, and different caveats. And I want to thank everyone who's still on listening. If you guys go ahead and drop a comment and tag someone who's interested in not just red teaming, but anything that has to do with red teaming and how it influences national security. So I appreciate your time, guys, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Aloha.
Bye, Steve.
Take care, guys.
Gentlemen.